there are a lot of nuances to authentication. And I was just trying to think of the analogy. What's it saying? Like, so Eskimos have like 85 different terms for snow. They know, or they're coming from Seattle. Like I knew like 13 different types of rain. You know, a lot of people are not that deep into authentication. I think it's just user authentication. It's just authentication. Just get someone signed in. But no, there's a lot of nuance, right? Are you talking about workforce? Are you talking about consumer? Are you talking about regulated? Are you talking about non-regulated? Are you talking about business partners? You know, are you talking about global? Like there's so many nuances to it that are important to understand, right? So everyone needs to know the top level. We provide that top level information about authentication, about where it fits in your identity stack. But for those who want to dig into the nuances and get deeper and deeper down, you know, we'll have content and experts on site to help them grok those as well.
Well, there's no nuance because passwords suck. So there's the nuance there. We don't want nuance there, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, there's use Passkeys. Yes.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm doing great, man. I mean, you know, we're in a new era, Jeff. That's what I wanted to say. So we're in the 300s in terms of episodes. It's going to be a long time between now and episode 400, probably almost 2 years before we get there. And we're also in our 5th year. So this is exciting times for the Identity at the Center podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I'd probably say we're like 98 episodes away or roundabouts there. So yeah, about a year. 2 years, I'd say somewhere between 2 years and maybe a year and a half, depending on how aggressive we get with conferences in the meantime.
Yeah, I think the most important thing everyone needs to know is that we drop episodes every Monday. We take a 2 to 3 week break over the course of the holidays, but every Monday we have an episode. It's available on any podcast platform just about that, you know, people have heard of. Now, there might be some ones out there that I'm not aware of, but
they don't matter. If we're not on it, it doesn't matter. That platform is dead to you and us.
Exactly. And we also are doing video podcasts now. So if you've been enjoying the audio podcast, you can continue to join it. You can still go out once in a while if you want to see these mugs, even for just one episode, so that if you see us at a conference, you know who we are. You can come up, introduce yourself. You know, the engagement from our audience, our listening audience, which I think is pretty loyal too. I really love hearing from people just saying they're getting a lot out of the podcast, whether they've been in the industry for a long time or they're brand new to the industry. And that's what we try to do with the podcast is, you know, bring up topics, get pretty advanced, but not go so deep right in the beginning of the show that we lose people, right? So we've been calling this like edutainment for a long time, right? We want the podcast to be educational for everyone, whether you're new to the space or whether you've been in for a long time. And we also want it to be entertaining, right? We don't want it to be like the run of the mill, like just, you know, we're just going to throw like technical terms at you for the next half hour, because that would be pretty boring. So we try to keep things light.
We got personality, right? We'll put some personality on this pig.
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Redhead personality, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of fun. We do it because we enjoy doing it, but you know, the byproduct is hopefully people also enjoy what we do. If you are listening, do us a favor, hop over to the YouTube channel and give us a like and subscribe. We're definitely trying to grow that channel. If you're a super fan, just throw our videos on repeat and play them overnight. That'll help us from a metric standpoint. You know, if you want to fall asleep, you know, or if you want to frighten people, maybe around Halloween, you know, throw our videos up on a big screen somewhere and, you know, have point and laugh or whatever it may be. But why don't we get to our guest today? We've got Andrew Shikiar. He's the executive director and CEO at the FIDO Alliance. Welcome back to the show, Andrew.
Jeff, Jim, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here, as always.
As always. And you say always because it basically is. This is your 8th time on the podcast, the current IDAC world record holder. Jim has promised a used sport coat, jacket, whatever you want to call it, when we hit 10 episodes with a hastily applied IDAC sticker, right, slapped on it just to show its worth. And so I think Jim's probably planning on bringing something over to Authenticate for that. He described it as
Jeff. Your description made it sound like it was like some old T-shirt with armpit stains in it. Like, this is going to be a good jacket. I've only worn it probably a couple times.
You have broader shoulders than me, but if you can narrow that down to like a 46 regular, I'll wear it with pride. I assure you that.
All right, that sounds good.
Yeah. So Andrew, you've been with us a bunch of time. Definitely, we're early on supporter, and here we are. I think it was like in the 50s the last time or the first time you were on, and now we're in the 300s. So definitely appreciate awesome. You being willing to kind of jump on, and certainly partnering up with the Authenticate conference, which is really what today's episode is going to be all about. Yeah. Authenticate 2024. It's coming up pretty soon. It would behoove me to notice that you're wearing a Passkeys shirt right now. People can see that. Where do I get one of those? Because I feel like the more people wearing it, the more people understand what it is and ask questions.
Yeah. It's fun. We opened up a FIDO store with a bunch of Passkeys swag earlier this year. So you can go to shop.fidoalliance.org. And there's a store there, and you can buy all sorts of Passkeys stuff. We're seeing a decent flow of commerce. So it's great to see the enthusiasm. Awesome to see people are actually doing this, and probably at industry shows and things like that. I'll tell you what, how about we do a discount code for IDAC listeners? Let's call it IDAC 10. All right. So you go to shop.fidoalliance.org, and then at checkout do IDAC 10, and you'll get 10% off. And then when you show up to Authenticate, you'll be all decked out in your Passkey gear.
Yeah, there you go. That's cool. So we'll have a link in our show notes for people to check that out.
Yeah, one caveat is, I actually don't know how to do discount codes, so I'm going to call it IDAC 10. So check the discount, check the show notes in case I screw that up. But we'll make sure that we have the proper discount code in the show notes. But as of now, it's IDAC 10. Yeah,
so we'll have a link in our show notes. I'll try to remember to put it on the screen somewhere once we got it confirmed. But we'll beg forgiveness from Megan or Adrian or whoever from the FIDO team is going to help us out with that, right?
Yeah, they've done amazing work with this. So yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. So, if you're not familiar with FIDO, and I ask this question every time, but I feel like it's an important one because we always have new listeners. Yeah. What is the FIDO Alliance? Can you just kind of give us a summary of what the mission is?
Yeah, absolutely. FIDO Alliance is an industry body. We were launched around 12 years ago, focused on reducing reliance on passwords. As all your listeners know, passwords cause all sorts of problems, ranging from usability to security, to hacks and data breaches and things like that. So FIDO Alliance is creating open standards to replace passwords. Notably, it includes passkeys. Passkeys are a password alternative that are built into just about every device that allows a user to sign in to sites and applications, basically with the same action they take to unlock their device. So typically, a biometric, built into your handset or your PC. It could be a security key or anything like that. So not only does that provide better usability for consumers, but most importantly, it allows the service provider to get rid of the passwords in the back end, which starts to change the threat vector for attackers, because attackers love passwords, right? They love phishing. They like taking over credentials, stuffing credentials. All that goes away with passkeys once you have eliminated the password on the back end. Plus, if you're in the e-commerce space, it allows for easier access to your site. So this year, I was honored to do a keynote at Identiverse, where I sat on stage with some companies that had deployed passkeys, and Amazon is one of them. Amazon talked about a 14% increase in sign-in success rate, meaning that 14%, 14% more users were able to sign into Amazon.com to make purchases. So you think about what that translates into from a bottom line standpoint. You start to see the benefit of passkeys, not just from a security standpoint, but really passkeys turn the sign-in into a revenue center for e-commerce vendors.
It's interesting, Andrew. I was working on a client PowerPoint presentation, and I went back to a presentation I created about 10 years ago, and it was, I was looking for a slide template that I could work from. And it talked about, kind of a down the road project or do later project, implement MFA. I'd say we passed the milestone a couple of years ago now where MFA became like, if you haven't already done that, you better get that in place. Now we're shifting into this passwordless world where, we've been talking about passwordless for many years, and now it's a reality, and Passkeys is a big part of that. I really love this Authenticate conference. I've been going for a few years now, and I consider myself more of a identity generalist, if you will. But you talk about Identiverse, right? You get that identity generalist perspective at Identiverse. They cover just about everything. The Authenticate conference really focuses on authentication, and it's a big driver of passwordless. So, like you said, you get brought into Identiverse and you come in with kind of like the consolidated message. But if you want to get the real scoop and you really want to understand that space, and it's not like a light switch. It's not like you go 1 year and you're all of a sudden going to be an authentication guru. But this is where the thought leadership is happening. This is where you can make contact and start building your network of the people who are really behind setting these standards. What are your thoughts?
No, I think you're exactly right. It is a deeper dive in authentication. That's the name Authenticate. And we've also enjoyed a nice partnership with the folks at Identiverse. In a lot of ways, it's a carry on, the community you'll see at Identiverse in the spring, you'll find in the fall at Authenticate, but with a deeper focus on all things authentication. User authentication is critical component, if not the most critical component to your broader IAM stack. And so it's really important to understand how people are signing into your site, into your service, into your network. And that's what we look at Authenticate. And Jim, I think your historical perspective on this, talking about MFA, is really on point. I mentioned before, I was talking about what FIDO does and how we're reducing reliance on passwords. It's not just that; it's actually changing the way that people think about authentication. We collectively have known for decades that passwords are insufficient, right? And for the past 20 years or so, the answer has been, well, let's layer on another factor on top of passwords as a primary factor. The question hasn't been, are passwords enough? The question's been, how do we make them suck less, right? And so the answer has been, well, let's add a layer. Let's add SMS OTP on top of this. Let's do TOTP. Let's do an app. Let's do a push notification. The problem is most of these approaches for MFA are flawed in their own right? They still rely on human actions, which leads to fallibility, which leads to account takeovers and bypasses and things like that. So what Passkeys actually do, what FIDO does, it actually introduces a true password replacement. Where no longer are you thinking about factors like MFA. Yes, use MFA, but ultimately, a passkey provides the same capabilities in a single gesture and a single action, and takes away this activity of counting factors, and instead really thinks about what the actual threat model is today, which is phishing. Right? Phishing, social engineering, that is the threat model. How do you attack that threat model? You make your authentication unphishable, which is what Passkeys do, which then ties back into your broader identity strategy and everything else. We start looking at, well, how am I considering account onboarding, account recovery, and authorization, and all the other things that go into an identity stack. You really need to start with the secure method of getting people into your system, into your network with user authentication. And that is what we dig deeper into at Authenticate.
So, Andrew, I feel like there is an opportunity here to craft a new shirt for your shop. And it's something along the lines of like FIDO Alliance established, whatever year, making passwords suck less or something like that. Since whatever date that might be, something like that, I think would be a lot of fun.
I think that is great. When we talk about the founding of FIDO Alliance, it's actually really important to note that the goal wasn't to get rid of passwords. The goal is to, turn the tide of data breaches. But passwords are the tip of that spear, right? And so our real goal is to stop, online fraud or identity-related fraud. But passwords are the source of most of those problems, right? So if you address a password problem, you're addressing scalable attacks, you're addressing data breaches, you're addressing credential stuffing, all those things associated with dependence on knowledge-based credentials.
So, Andrew, one of the things I hear clients talk about a lot, when it's like you talk about passwordless, right? So you're talking about really getting rid of the password. The client doesn't need to know the password, or the end user doesn't need to know the password. Versus MFA, where it's two factors. So let's assume that they're using some kind of strong authenticator, a biometric, or something like that. Then they'll challenge me and say, well, isn't adding a password just strengthening things? Because now I'm using two factors rather than one. So doesn't the password actually strengthen the authentication?
Yeah. So the second factor will strengthen the authentication, but the primary factor is still incredibly weak, right? So I think there's also a misconception out there that, forcing people to have very complex passwords, so unique character strings, or even, generated passwords, is secure in and of itself. So any password can be phished, any password can be stolen. But also there's a huge, backdoor account recovery, which pertains to a variety of sign-in methods, actually, where someone social engineers an account recovery process from a help desk or support desk, calling in, pretending to be somebody, getting that, that account regenerated to a fake, to an attacker, which allows them then to take over that account. So again, relying on passwords as a primary factor is inherently flawed, and it's always going to put you down a path towards account takeovers. Now, backing up a password, so that being said, I understand that a lot of people have legacy infrastructure and want to get to a passkey future, but need to have a migration path. Having an MFA system where you have a hardware-backed second factor, like a security key, where someone needs to prove possession of a credential to sign in and to trigger a recovery process. That is a much better approach than using legacy forms of 2FA based on a fundamentally flawed primary factor of a password.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's a very complex topic in terms of there's so many, it depends on some of the use case scenario that you're talking about as well. So there's that recovery aspect, the kind of the unhappy path that could be exploited. There's the use case, like if you're going out to millions of users in kind of a CIM perspective, the same reasons why MFA is hard to roll out to the large population is the same reason why, having people who lose their password and can't log in or lose their second credential, get a new phone. Yeah. They have problems with the recovery process. So I guess why I brought up that whole topic is very nuanced, and those are the kind of conversations that happen at the Authenticate conference. I love Identiverse, right? But it covers so many different topics, whereas the Authenticate conference just focuses on authentication, and you can have time for these kind of conversations. I think as the IAM practitioner, within your company, you're expected to be the expert and be able to talk about and handle these types of questions, right? And the way you do that is to sink yourself into these topics, interact with the experts in the world who are the deepest thinkers on these topics, and they're at Authenticate. So to me, that's like the value. Like if you've never gone to the conference before and you're thinking, well, my job doesn't just focus on authentication, so I'm going to go broad brush. And I understand that. And I think, the other angle to it is like, not everybody can go to every conference that they want to. But even if you just get to Authenticate like one time, for me, I highly encourage it, because I just feel like, diving into the deep end in a topic, you can get a lot of benefit from that.
I think that there are a lot of nuances to authentication. And I was just trying to think of the analogy. What's it saying? Like, so Eskimos have like 85 different terms for snow. Or they're coming from Seattle. Like I knew like 13 different types of rain. A lot of people are not that deep into authentication. I think it's just user authentication. It's just authentication. Just get someone signed in. But no, there's a lot of nuance, right? Are you talking about workforce? Are you talking about consumer? Are you talking about regulated? Are you talking about non-regulated? Are you talking about business partners? Are you talking about global? Like, there's so many nuances to it that are important to understand, right? So everyone needs to know the top level. We provide that top level information about authentication, about where it fits in your identity stack. But for those who want to dig into the nuances and get deeper and deeper down, we'll have content and experts on site to help them grok those as well.
Well, there's no nuance because passwords suck. So there's no nuance there. We don't want nuance
there, right? Yes, exactly. Well, use Passkeys. Yes.
So obviously the experts in the industry are going to be there. Who else should be there? Who else is the conference for?
It's for anyone interested in authentication and identity, frankly, right? So last year we had, I think, around 40% of the people said they were newer to Passkeys, newer to FIDO, which is awesome, right? So we also had probably 30+% who are pros, who really got into these nooks and crannies of authentication. So we tailor the content, we tailor the flow of the show to cater to anyone interested in user authentication, anyone interested in Passkeys, and the adjacent topics therein should come to this conference. I think we should have over 600 people this year, well over 600 people. Everyone brings their own perspective, their own background, or their own learning agenda into the 3 days that we have at Authenticate.
Yeah, and I can speak from personal experience going this past year. The environment of the conference gives you time to really reflect, and the size of the conference gives you the opportunity to engage with people, including the experts. I found that, it's just like people are very approachable. You can just go sit down at a table with a bunch of people and network and, some of the top minds in the field. Now, so if we've got people interested, which hopefully now they're like, okay, I'm sold. I want to go. We're in like this critical period, right? So this episode is going to drop on September 2nd. We've got a discount code that we've had out there for a while. It's IDAC 15, gives you 15% off your registration fees, but it's also the last week of early bird pricing for the conference, right? So if you're going to go, make that decision this week and get registered before, September 9th?
I don't have a calendar in front of me. It would be that Friday, the Friday after Labor Day in the US.
Yeah.
I think that would be September somewhere, single digits.
Single digits. Well, okay.
Register early and often. That's the message, right? Don't miss out on
It's a Friday, and so I want to say September 6th or 9th or something like that. Anyways, as soon as you hear this, go register. So, the conference itself is great. Jim, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, one of the ideal we have for this is that you feel like you're going to a retreat, not just your typical hotel conference, right? So the venue itself is fantastic. It's a resort setting in Carlsbad, California. If you haven't been to Southern California in mid-October, you're missing out. It's a really nice grounds. One thing I really loved seeing last year is just people, like you're saying, is kind of strolling around and mingling. Right? I was calling all our authenticators, kind of taking over the grounds of this beautiful resort, and you'd see people sitting in these tables around palm trees by that pool, like talking about authentication. So it's a really neat venue. It does have a kind of retreat type mentality to it. We want people to feel like that. For those who are inclined to do things outside of the conference, there's world-class golf there. There's surfing at the beach nearby. It's a great place to come and dig deeper into authentication and really to lean into the broader FIDO and authentication community. I say this every year, and I'm starting to get ribbed for this actually, but the sense of community here is quite strong. There's kind of a missionary feel to what we're doing at FIDO Alliance and Authenticate, because no one thinks that what we're doing is a bad idea, right? Everyone understands that we're trying to make passwords suck and really suck less and do away with those. And everyone understands the importance of that. So as an attendee, if you're trying to learn and you have a use case, go to the sessions. The experts will take time to talk to you, right? Everyone wants you to be successful because there's a sense of joint opportunity and joint responsibility, understanding that, the integrity of the internet itself is only as strong as its weakest link. So the more sites and the more enterprises, the more companies that start hardening their authentication systems and architectures, the better off everyone is. It allows everyone to move forward into a more secure future and a more seamless and usable internet experience once people are using passkeys instead of relying on passwords.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conference. It's October 14th through the 16th. It's in Carlsbad, California. Couldn't ask for generally a better weather experience, at least in the U.S. Yeah, it's one of my favorite conferences for sure, and I like the environment. It seems like it's a very social. Casual is probably not the word, but I feel like there's a lot of conversation and discussion.
Yeah.
It's not so much presentation, right? It's, hey, let's sit down. Last year there were food trucks and, a bunch of us kind of sat around a table, just talked identity or different things and things like that. And it was a very open and fun kind of conference, which I really appreciate, because I think sometimes we get into these other conferences, which are also great, but they're huge, right? And you're shuffling from like one session to another, and there's not sometimes even time to breathe. I like to have time to breathe, and I want to sit down and talk with people. And if I can do it under a palm tree in Southern California weather in October, sign me up. I am totally in.
Yeah, bring sunscreen. No, we do build in extra networking time, but the presentations are great, and there is a challenge, putting on a conference like this, because there's so much content that we want to get out there. Right? We had hundreds of submissions this year. I think we have 93 sessions or something like that, so it's a manageable number, but it's built across 4 tracks. And so people, we have tracks covering, different types of, passkey rollouts, usability, different sort of sector specific, things like looking at identity verification, payments, government, automotive, and all sorts of things that get a little deeper into specific use cases. And so it's a chance to attend those and learn about them. One thing I will note is that we do actually have remote participation. We video everything, so we have a live stream for those who cannot attend in person. But significantly, for those who are on site, who have a track conflict, you can go back and watch all the content too. So we make that available to attendees.
Thank you.
Find yourself like I couldn't. Yeah.
Thank you so much, because there's always a conflict, and I was like, all right, how do I split time between these 2, 3, 4 sessions all taking place at the same time? I can always go back and review it.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, we're very grateful for and we care about our remote attendees, but we're most interested in actually archiving this content and making it available first for conference attendees and eventually to the general public, because the content is gold. There's so much being conveyed, from experts, that we want to make sure that this is captured and shared and really, helping educate the industry at large.
I know we talked a lot about Authenticate here, right? The one in October in Carlsbad, but you're actually going to be at an APAC conference in Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah.
Is that also a FIDO event?
It is the FIDO APAC Summit, similar to Authenticate actually in some ways, but it's a 2-day conference, their second one we've done. It's an amazing show in its own right. So for anyone listening in Asia Pacific, it's not too late to book flights to go to KL. It's the following week, September 9th, 10th, 11th in Kuala Lumpur. Whichever, and 300 people attending that conference over 2.5 days, learning, all about FIDO authentication. We look at some region dependent activities. We have expert speakers from different case studies, different sectors in APAC, and it's been really interesting to watch the Asian market evolve. I mean, a lot of the earliest FIDO supporters and deployments were from Asia. But we've seen a particular amount of innovation in Southeast Asia, which is where we've launched this conference. So last year we had it in Vietnam. This year it's in Malaysia, because there's so much happening in this corner of Asia Pacific, this corner of the world, that it's important to try to harness it. And again, create a forum where people can meet each other and share best practices and learn and advance their own authentication objectives. So FIDO APAC Summit is the event that people should be looking to attend in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, not a bad gig for you either. You get to see all over the world, which is pretty cool. But back on this conference in the U.S., so the Authenticate conference, he talked to us a little bit about the types of content that are going to be in store. what are some of the highlights that people should be aware of that, you think there's going to be a big draw?
Yeah, I mean, I think backing up a little bit, one of the most common questions I get from people who reach out to FIDO Alliance is, well, can you give me an example of someone who's done this? Give me an example of someone who's done that. Tell me about someone who has deployed, FIDO for payment authentication, or tell me about a workforce setting, or are there examples of governments who have deployed this for intra-agency authentication? We get a lot of use case requests, and so what we focus on at Authenticate is kind of use case driven content. So getting practitioners to come speak and share their experiences, and it's incredibly powerful because typically it's either spot on to what someone has on their own agenda, their own professional agenda, or it's adjacent enough where someone can learn from that, and then, like you mentioned, go engage with the speaker afterwards to just pick their brain and learn more about how they can apply that to their own learning. So, in general, I'd say it's kind of practitioner-centric content in the breakout tracks for practitioners to use in their daily lives.
And if I can interrupt you there, Andrew, because I feel the same way. Like the practitioner content to me, the most impactful over the last 2 years, just seeing, oh, wow, this isn't just Apple, Microsoft, and Google that are doing this. This is regular companies, non-tech companies that are using Passkeys and going passwordless. It's not just exciting from a philosophical perspective, but in the real world, this stuff is taking root.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. And one thing that's been really cool to see is how the content has evolved, right? As this industry has matured, our content has matured as well, right? So it's not just like we have this content, like building your case for getting rid of passwords, but it's not just that. It's not theoretical. It's actual, right? So it's actual, it's practical, and it's getting into, again, the more and more nuance, right? Understanding these very specific scenarios for deploying, for user authentication today, but also, we're looking at these adjacent spaces as well, like looking forward. So there's adjacent technologies. And we had a big push. Actually, at Identiverse this year, we launched our identity verification certification program. So we have a big focus on identity verification because we talk about, again, the threat model. So yes, authentication is a primary threat model, but there's a giant backdoor. If you're for in account recovery, that can be exposed if you are still onboarding people with knowledge-based credentials, right? So we have a certification program now that encourages utilization of technologies, identity verification technologies that are doing what I'll call possession-based onboarding and possession-based recovery, leveraging the ability to recognize someone's face, right? So face verification. So we have a whole breakout track on identity verification, how that ties into your user authentication strategy. We have breakout tracks on, like I mentioned before, on payments, on government use cases. Again, looking at kind of the consumer versus workforce authentication, other complementary technologies and standards that are emerging around verifiable credentials and things like that. So we touch on all aspects of identity with the deepest focus, of course, on user authentication.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The other thing I'll mention, Andrew, I mean, this could be a major draw for the conference, is that Jeff and I will be there. We're talking about, we're workshopping right now on kind of being the transition between the keynote and dinner. The funny thing is, like, Jeff and I are going to be competing with food the entire time.
We're always competing with food. Let's be honest here.
It's true. So we're, expecting to do that. We're workshopping because the idea is that we're going to have a family feud game. So we have to figure out how to do that. But it's kind of a fun way to transition from the keynotes, which are, heavy and impactful, to something that's a little bit lighter before we go out and network and have dinner. And then we'll also be podcasting. So, we've got several podcasts lined up. One of them is the DIAF. They've got a scholarship winner from the Vittorio Bertucci award. One annual winner comes to Authenticate. So we'll be interviewing that person. along with Ian Glazer, I think is going to help moderate.
Awesome.
And then all of our podcasts are going to have seating available. So people who are interested in hearing the show be recorded live and maybe picking up the microphone and asking a question or two themselves, that's going to be an option. And I think right now what Adrian and Megan have in the works is that it's going to be in the expo hall, kind of situated in a corner, and it's going to take place during the lunch hour or during food time so that we're not competing with other sessions. So if people want to go session to podcast to session, it's possible. But we're going to be competing with food.
I had a lot of fun doing your live podcast at Denver. So that was a new experience for me.
Us
like
too.
There's an audience. As an audience, I'm like, oh God, I can't. It's live. So it's a lot of fun doing that, and we're thrilled to have you guys there. And I think you'll compete well with dinner. We're looking forward to the family feud, whatever that may bring. It'll be a fun way to engage the audience and engage the community we're talking about. And then we should talk about the evening activities because we want Authenticate to be fun. And it is fun, right? And so we'll have, like last year, we had this food truck set up outside the expo hall. By the way, we have an amazing expo hall this year, so it's almost sold out. Great vendors who have a lot of things planned to share with the attendees. But you can segue from that on the opening night into the kind of the food truck area, which is good networking. The second night, we're going to have our blowout party again, which exceeded my expectations. It was a lot of fun, and people carried on into the wee hours of the evening, or the wee hours of the morning even. Like there were some people lingering in the pools, I understand, until after midnight both nights. So
don't name names.
If you're a late night cool person, this is a place for you as well.
What happens in Carlsbad stays in Carlsbad to some degree.
It was a lot of fun. Names.
It's a fun conference, right? And I think that's probably, hopefully, what people get out of this. And hopefully we'll see a lot of people there. The three of us will be there, and a whole bunch of other people. It's just a good time and really good, interesting conversations, which is a great mix. So there's definitely a lot going on. I'm particularly excited about this Family Feud idea because I've had ideas for shows that Jim and I have been trying to figure out how to kind of work some of this stuff, especially for kind of like live events and stuff, as we're starting to do more of that. So things may change, right? We never know, but we are trying to figure out how that works. I'm particularly excited to, see how we can pull this off and continue to iterate on these kind of things in the future. I'd still like to do a Hot Ones style. That's been on my bucket list for like 2 to 3 years now.
What?
A Hot Ones style where we do spicy food throughout. So if you're familiar with Hot Ones on YouTube, it's an interview that somebody does with somebody else, usually celebrities, and they're both eating progressively spicier chicken wings or vegan wings, things like that. And something like that, I think, would be a lot of fun. Now, I'm not a spicy food person, so I'm sure people get a riot out of me turning red and maybe dying on the show. But stuff like that, I think, could be interesting.
Yeah. Well, we'll start a Family Feud and see where it goes.
If you haven't seen Hot Ones before, Andrew, it's like the concept really gets, it's like usually the 6th or 7th wing is up to 10, and like the 10th wing is just inedible, right? So then you're having to answer questions while you're physically suffering. If you're the celebrity who's being interviewed, it's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a really good interview. Like it's basically what's the guy's name? Sean something. Can't remember his last name. And he interviews celebrities, and it's been really interesting to see how the show has grown on YouTube over the years. I mean, it's a whole thing now. It used to be like D-list celebrities, and now they're getting A-list celebrities.
No kidding.
Putting them through the gauntlet of these spicy wings, and some people can handle it better than others. If you haven't checked it out, it's a lot of fun. And the one thing that really strikes me is the interview is really good. It's not just there's hot sauce and that's like the only thing to it. The questions go really deep, and everybody who is interviewed always comments about like, wow, how did you know? That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me about that. So it's a really good, also, if you're looking at doing this type of interview type stuff, it's a good model to follow.
So we'd be geeking out on authentication while slowly melting down from
heat. Okay. into a puddle of sweat and tears in a corner of the room.
Sounds like there's potential there for a future Authenticate 28, 29 maybe.
Yeah, build up a tolerance over the next couple of years and just, do like your training, hot sauce a day every day. All right, let's try to wrap things up here because you're very generous with time. You're on the West Coast. I know it's earlier for you. I want to put you on the spot because usually we'll end the show on a lighter note. And we didn't discuss this before. Usually, just to kind of, peek behind the curtain of how we do this, is I'll come up with something that's like a lighter note question at the end for the end of the show, but I'll share it just before we hit record so that at least our guest has a little bit of time to think about this. In this case, that is not what happened here. I came up with one before the show, forgot to mention it, and then I came up with another one while we were talking here. So you can feel free to answer.
Jeff, I noticed I did not get the question. I was wondering about this because it's always kind of a thing. And I was like, well, maybe they didn't do it this. Maybe like now they're over 300 shows. They don't do this anymore. They're all buttoned up now. Or right. I didn't think that maybe they're going to totally surprise me without.
So definitely the latter. I have two questions. Okay. You can answer or not. We'll give you the opportunity to pass. So the first question is passkey related. If you had to rank regions of the world in passkey adoption, who is first and who is last? So what I mean by that is there in a particular area of the world that has really like embraced passkeys and you're seeing a lot of adoption. And then the opposite of that is where is it still slow and we need to drive more awareness or whatever it may be?
That's a tough one to quantify. Because so many companies that are deploying this at scale are global. Amazon's global, TikTok's global, Google global, Apple's global, Microsoft's global, eBay, Walmart. The list goes on. So that's really a tough one to answer if you're talking about consumer implementations. So we think there's over 13 or 15 billion user accounts that have a passkey now. So it's tough to quantify. I mean, I'll tell you some things I've seen though that are really exciting. Over the past several months, we've seen a ton of activity in Australia, and it's a meaningful market. But we've seen the government with their MyGov implementation allow passkeys for sign in there. I just saw the Telstra allow sign in for your Telstra mobile account. Ubank, which is a neobank, is supporting passkeys for banking. And so I'm seeing a lot of it's interesting to see some of these regions start building momentum within them. And it really does build upon itself because it does a couple of things. One, once you see a lead service provider or government supporting passkeys, it makes it easier for the next one to follow suit. Because if you point to that, it's an exemplar. And so it makes it easier. But also, I believe there's consumer demand. Right? Consumers are starting to understand what passkeys are and they want to use passkeys. Right. So the survey we did earlier this year showed that over half of consumers have been offered a passkey and have chosen to use one. And so you're starting to see consumer awareness, consumer demand for this. So once you get some momentum going in a region, more and more lead on the consumer side, service providers will support them. So hope that answers your question. I don't have a last because I'm never going to name anyone last.
I figured I'd try.
Yeah, we're seeing global growth but it's really cool to see certain regions, explode onto the scene, and we're seeing hints of that in certain areas of South America as well, and that'll be an area to watch as we move forward, between 2024 2025.
Okay, now something not identity related, but related to. You were going to be with us on a show a couple weeks ago, and you had some flight difficulties, which I think we've all been there and understand it.
Yeah.
So here's my question to the three of us, and definitely gut reaction here. What's the worst thing you've ever seen on an airplane?
Seen on an airplane, or worst like travel delay? Seen on
worst thing you've seen or experienced, maybe let's say on an airplane. I'll give you an example. Like for me,
yeah, go first.
I've seen people with like their shoes off, like up on top of people's seats behind them, and the person in front of them is totally oblivious that their head is like mere, inches away from somebody's gross foot. Things like that is kind of what I'm thinking about.
Bare feet, stinky food, just general inconsiderateness are things that I see every now and then, and I tend to try to block them out. And put blinders on or mentally forgotten it because
you're so scarred.
Yeah. I'm a father of two lovely kids, and they were small at one point. So like the crying baby thing doesn't bother me as much anymore. Although I was on a flight recently with one of my kids and I had like the cryingest baby ever. I forget where we were going, but it was a just up to Seattle from LA. And this child was going nonstop from like takeoff to landing. So that's unavoidable. Like the more time you spend on planes, the more of this stuff you're going to see. And just try not to let it get to me too much.
Jim, about yourself, what's the worst thing you've seen on a plane?
Okay, first thing, Jeff, you'd like me to not complain, right? But then you bring this question up.
I'm giving this to you, man.
This is a golden ticket for me.
Right.
Okay. Second off, I thought Andrew might say Antarctica as a region that there's not much passkey adoption.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised, Jim.
There's fewer operations, but maybe they'll have it. Maybe they're leading the pack. We don't know.
It could be 100%. Okay. In terms of bad stuff on airplanes, I've seen some vomiting, turbulence, people freaking out. Those are all bad. But I had one happen to me recently, so I can tell more of a detailed story, where I was on the phone with Denise, and I was in the waiting area, the terminal, and there's a baby just going off. And like Andrew, I've had young kids, I've traveled with them, so I've learned to be extra patient and understanding. And Denise says to me, like, "What's up with that baby?" Like, she could hear it through my my Bluetooth, and I said, "Oh, I should be fine. I got upgraded to first class." Jeff, I texted you. Do you ever regret being upgraded to first class? You're like,
I remember
no,
this
never.
text. Yep.
So I get into first class. I'm in row 4. Row 3 happens to be this mother and the baby's going off. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm just going to put my music on extra loud. And I did that. But the worst part, the most inconsiderate part was, and it's only like a 45-minute flight, but we got delayed on the runway. So we're sitting there for like 45 minutes. So the captain says, okay, you can get up and go to the bathroom. Well, this baby went number 2 in her diaper. She wasn't really a baby. She's more of a toddler. And we're sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, thank goodness she can get up now and take her to the bathroom and change the diaper. Well, she doesn't. And like everybody in the whole area is like holding their nose and like grumbling and stuff, and including me. I was like, come on. You have to smell that. You have to smell that. And it was just like, and like the entire flight, I could smell it. And I was just like, this is not good. I wish
that's
I
the
was
thing, right?
in first class.
It's like smells are probably the worst thing because sometimes they linger. Food is always bad. I'm a McDonald's fan. I love McDonald's, but on a plane, like it just kind of like lingers, and somebody will bring up fries. And then one thing, a couple things might happen. One, I'll be hungry for McDonald's fries. That's just going to happen. 2 is it just kind of sits there. And it's like, like, what are we going to do with that, greasy kind of smell, whatever it may be. So those are pet peeves for me. The other one for me is the sunshade on windows. People who fly with it open, where it's like a 6 a.m. flight and the light just shines through the entire cabin to people who are trying to sleep. And I don't know what the etiquette is around this, but I feel like if you're sitting next to a window and it is very bright outside and the sun is literally shining into the cabin, take a look around you. Is it hitting someone in the face? Is it hit them right in the eyes? They can't see. Maybe just lower it a little bit to help them out. That would be great.
There's an obligation there. It's an active role. The window person in a morning or twilight flight. You can't just take that casually. It's almost like the emergency exit questions you get. Should be very prepared to, be aware of the well-being of the people around you. What's your window shade? So it's a fair question. None of these things will happen to people who fly to Authenticate, by the way. All flights to Authenticate are problem-free. They smell great, and there's no crying. So please book your flights. I'll be driving.
No crying, not
Angeles.
much crying. Jim and I will be there, so there might be some crying.
Yeah, but not on the way to or fro. So don't let this dissuade anybody from coming, please.
Now, I think everybody has these experiences, right? They got a plane. For the most part, I travel a lot. I fly a lot. For the most part, things are fine. But every once in a while, you just get that thing. And, fortunately, we have things like noise canceling earbuds that can, drown out babies or other noises or whatever it may be. But yeah, every once in a while, there's this thing is just like, oh, and it really strikes me as sort of like, these are first world problems. Like if this is what I'm complaining about, I'm probably doing okay. Right. In the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Flying's not fun, but it's a necessary thing. And We're looking forward to seeing people get on planes and land in San Diego or Orange County, and we'll see them at Authenticate, which will be
Yes.
fantastic.
Come out to Authenticate. Join the three of us. Really looking forward to it. October 14th to the 16th. Use our discount code IDAC15. You get 15% off. Stack it on top of the soon to expire early bird discounts, things like that. So we'll have links in our show notes for people to check out all that stuff, and hopefully people take advantage of it. So we're going to go ahead and leave it there for this episode. You can visit us on the web, idacpodcast.com. We'll have a link to FIDO Alliance website as well, and the FIDO shop, so you can get yourself a cool t-shirt as well and show support. Andrew will have a link to your LinkedIn profile as well for people who want to reach out and connect that way. Let's see what else. We're on Twitter or X or whatever it might be called at IDAC Podcast. Again, if you give us a like and subscribe on YouTube, that would be fantastic. idacpodcast.tv will take you right to our channel. And connect with Jim and I. Send us ideas for shows. Send us comments, criticisms, concerns, all that good stuff. And we'll take that under advisement. Won't promise anything, but we'll read it. All right, let's go ahead and leave it there. Thanks, everyone, for watching or listening. And we'll talk with everyone in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.